Hello, everyone, and welcome to Primetime Crisis Live. I'm your host, Captain Logan. Welcome to week 27, and let me introduce the Crisis team. This evening, I have with me the Curious Lo.
Star Wars is coming to Disneyland. Ah!
Is that a yay thing or like a freak out?
Yes. No, it's a yay thing. That's just where my brain's at.
Really exciting. And remember, if you don't know about Curious Lo, she works there, so that's part of why that's such a big deal. But where the Steve Baxi?
What Lo said. I'm really excited. I might actually go to Disneyland now.
Come visit me!
and I think the real Manos is here. Manos?
Dun dun dun!
He's always got to make an entrance. Manos, when your screen blacked out, we all just assumed you weren't here anymore. Manos, there's a reason I made you go last.
Think of something.
Because, people are always like, I
suspected it much.
I can't follow Manos. So I decided to let you go. And you didn't disappoint, Manos. That was absolutely wonderful. I was a little method, but I enjoyed it. Everybody, thanks for being here tonight. It's very good to have you. If you are joining us live, remember that there is a blue chat in the description, and you can go there and chat with your fellow viewers as we are talking about tonight's episode. And you can also mention things about the episode and ask us questions and things if you watched it, so feel free to try to join in the fun there, and we will read some things periodically as we go through. Tonight, we are talking about the Curious Lo's retro pick, and she chose a Darkwing Duck episode that I don't mind saying right away I absolutely adored, and I can't wait to get into it. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is an excellent choice, and I think an excellent choice for reasons that Lo, probably not being the big comic aficionado some of us are, is not even aware of yet. So it's going to be really fun to talk about this with their fellow co-hosts. So let me, before we get into that, mention a couple of things. First of all, right after the show is the Great Debate. We've been looking forward to this all week. This is going to be so much fun. Just after Crisis tonight, we're going to have Steve Baxi and Dan Torrey duking it out to decide who is the greater pop culture icon, Batman or Spider-Man, and we'll be doing a formal debate on that topic directly after this. Because of that, we will not have an open forum tonight, so here's how things are going to work. Right after we get finished talking about Darkwing Duck, we're going... Never thought I'd say that. I don't know why. Right after we're finished talking about Darkwing Duck, what we're going to do... He said seriously. We're class. Here's the itinerary. We're going to have a pre-show for the debate right here during Crisis. So nobody go anywhere until after we're finished with that and we switch over to the other show. Both are on Facebook and Twitter and are of course in your YouTube feed. So you'll be able to go to the other live show once the debate starts. But what we wanted to do was do a little bit of a pre-show for the debate and have these guys speculate it, because I have to be the impartial host and moderator. So I'm not going to be able to do a lot of talking, but we're going to let you guys help Manos and Lo a little bit later make some predictions about the debate and talk about who you think is going to win. So we'll have that fun discourse right after this, and that will also give Steve and Dan some time to cram and prepare a little bit. Dan's not here yet. Hopefully we'll see him here in just a little bit. And let's go ahead and get right into it. Thanks everybody for being here once again. Good to see you. And let's jump right into it, panel. We begin with the Curious Lo, who's going to tell us why she chose this particular episode, and then the rest of us are going to explain why we loved it. Go ahead, Lo.
So we watched the episode Time and Punishment of Darkwing Duck, and I mostly chose this just because it was kind of the first superhero thing that I ever was really introduced to as a kid. This show was on when I was like 3. Like, I was very young when this first started, so it was kind of just always around. And as I got older, I kind of realized that it was basically Disney's answer to Batman. So I guess it's, kind of appropriate for tonight. But yeah, I grew up loving Darkwing Duck, and this specific episode felt very, like, kind of meta, I guess, almost, in that it was doing a lot of commentary on things that I may not know a ton about, but I at least recognized as things that are prevalent in superhero media and comics and movies and stuff. So I felt like it would be a fun one to get your guys' opinions on, because there's certainly things in there that I have no idea what they're pertaining to or referencing. So just thought it would be a fun one.
Start with Steve, because this is, of course, a parody of a lot of Batman stuff, and I think, of course, that there's some kind of just generalized 90s anti-hero stuff going on as well. And of course, we've seen a million Miller spoofs, but I thought this one was particularly pretty well done. Steve, what did you think about it, especially on that Batman and Frank Miller level?
I really, really liked it. I've always loved making fun of Dark Knight Returns. It's one of my favorite Batman comics, but it's also really, really easy to take out of context and skew it and make fun of, because it does a lot of preposterous things. So seeing Darkwing Duck turn into Dark Warrior Duck, like all the 90s comics that have Warrior in the title, he's Judge Dredd, and he's got all those spikes, and he's got absurd laws and stuff going on. He's got the Bat Tank, except it's a duck. I thought all that stuff was great. And I liked how kind of faithful it was to Dark Knight Returns. The idea being that he thinks he's lost his child, so he becomes lethargic and stops being who he is for a long period of time, and then goes back and does it with even more vengeance. It's very much a Dark Knight Returns kind of story, and a lot of people kind of gloss over that, especially when they're making parodies. The big thing I didn't realize is Darkwing Duck is Wesley Dodds' Sandman before he's Batman. Because he's got the gas gun, he's got the hat, he's got like almost a suit going for his costume. He seems to be more of that character than I ever realized. And there was even some neat stuff here and there talking about just the nature of 90s comics and some of the preposterous things and some of the more violent things that we would do in the name of creating edgier superheroes, and how they take all that and play it for comedy. It reminded me a lot of the Spielberg Warner Brothers cartoons, like Freakazoid and Animaniacs, particularly, because they do that stuff all the time as well.
I had exactly the same thing with it. I was reminded of all the Tiny Toons stuff, and like not derivative. And if anything, that was potentially derivative of this. But I was reminded of the stuff with like Plucky Duck pretending to be Batman and all that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it reminded me of.
Steve, was this a show that you watched it all growing up? I know you're a little bit younger than I am.
I used to watch this right alongside all the other Spielberg cartoons as well. I've always was more of like a Warner Brothers, Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny guy than anything on the Disney side. But I like this a lot because it always reminded me more of a Warner Brothers thing than it did a Disney thing. The way Darkwing is characterized is very much like Daffy Duck, and he's actually even playing on some of the tropes of old Bugs Bunny cartoons where Bugs Bunny would become Superman.
Yeah, it's really funny that you're saying that, because I had that all the way through, and I kept thinking, do I just not remember how Disney cartoons were? Like is it bad that I'm having a Warner Brothers vibe? Lo, how do you think this compares to other Disney, especially classic Disney cartoons?
I think if you were to compare it to nowadays Disney, you would be surprised at how silly some, and in a bad way, nowadays Disney is. Especially stuff that's actually on the Disney Channel. I mean, I still think that their movies are going strong, but a lot of their TV stuff has become a lot more dumbed down, I guess, than some of the stuff that I remember growing up with. And I always kind of thought that it was just because I had the nostalgia factor, but I've gone back and been watching stuff recently, and like DuckTales is awesome and like ridiculous, but like funny and smart at the same time. And what are some of the other shows? Like Gummy Bears holds up kind of well, and I was a little weirded out by that because I remember that being really silly. I mean, it's still a cartoon, of course, and I mean, you watch this episode of Darkwing Duck, and it's not like crazy amazing, like the best thing ever, but it actually has like a full plot line, and there's character development, and especially if you watch the series in order, there's a lot of lessons that the characters learn over time, and villains that come back, and even some of the villains go through character arcs, and they have a character who basically is Catwoman, who is kind of his nemesis but also love interest, and there's weird things with that. And so I don't know, I think Darkwing Duck is probably the best of them, but I think that there are other ones that hold up, just none of the ones today.
Well, I thought this was incredibly smart for this kind of a cartoon. It's got this amazing balance where there is a character arc, but not for who you think it would be for. It's Gosalyn's before it's anybody's, and it's got it's sharply written. It's a tight narrative. There's a lot of payoffs for things. Everything's set up at the very beginning of the episode. Gosalyn is really obsessed with like really violent TV and stuff, and she kind of learns a little bit of a lesson about it, how that's kind of arbitrary and out of nowhere, and if somebody really acted like that, what would it actually be going that far? And it's actually talking about what justice really is, kind of surprised by that, and the animation is fantastic. I mean, like everything about this. But I guess what I meant to say about the balance thing is that it still is a really goofy, silly, fun cartoon. Mm-hmm. And so you're constantly blindsided by how incredibly intelligently written it is. Go ahead, Manos. What do you think?
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I would watch this every so often, and it was easily my favorite of the Disney afternoon. Because keep in mind, I was a bit older than you guys. I think it was in my I don't remember when exactly this show was on. Late 80s or early 90s.
Like 91 to 93.
Early 90s?
Yeah.
Okay. I was right at school then. About around 2021 when this show was on. So, it needs to have a little more intelligence to, keep me grounded. And it definitely was. It was definitely my favorite of the Disney afternoon shows. I did like DuckTales from time to time, but Darkwing Duck was like, oh, it's kind of a duck parody of Batman. Okay, I get it. And I really dug it. And the animation, like you said, is really stylish and beautiful to look at. I mean, sometimes I would forget that these are duck people running around. And I like the fact that the show is really smartly written, and it doesn't attack the standard mainstream bullet points that I'd see people make fun of superheroes in comic books like all the time. It actually, even at the time when I was like 21, this show struck me as like, oh, these guys actually have read comic books. These guys know what they're talking about because they're making fun of things that are pretty specific that I have read about. And in the case of this particular episode, I think it does that. With what you mentioned about Gosalyn's thoughts about crime and punishment and how she gets turned around on that when she sees Darkwing Duck kind of go ballistic after thinking he's lost her. It also speaks to Darkwing Duck's psychosis issues, because that's another thing. They sort of poke fun lightly that Batman is crazy, and I think this show actually did that a little bit more than Bruce Timm's Batman show did. Because, it's comedy and parody, so, I think it gave him enough room to kind of dig more into that idea. Which had to be more of a inspiring heroic show. So this show was really good. It's funny. I was watching this, and I remember this episode, and I remember thinking, as I was watching again the other day for this review, it's like, wow, there's a Superman animated episode, much like this plot, actually, where Superman, where Lois goes into, I think, a different dimension, where Superman had lost her and becomes this, Dark Warrior Duck kind of character himself, where he starts making the city like super duper safe, even to the point of being a dictator. I was like, oh, and that episode came after this one, so it's like, oh, I wonder. But this was a really enjoyable experience. The show holds up very well, actually. I figured Darkwing Duck would, because I remember it being pretty wisely written. I will say a lot of the animated shows that Disney does now really aren't up to par, with the exception of Gravity Falls. I think Gravity Falls is the only major Disney cartoon that they do right now, which is like that well animated, that smartly written, as well as being funny.
I really like Phineas and Ferb too. I think that held up. I mean, I think it's done now, but I think that was a good Disney cartoon too. But yeah, for the most part, They don't hold up that well.
Yeah, I've seen a couple. Because I watch Gravity Falls, so hey, other stuff pops on, and you give it for a second, and you go, oh, isn't that good? Like Gravity Falls, I really love. Star versus Evil is close to being a really great show, but I think it needs maybe a few more episodes or something. But yeah, a lot of good Disney shows seem to be. I don't know. I guess trying to be. I don't know. Maybe trying to be Cartoon Network shows or Warner Brothers kind of shows, or maybe they're stuck in this problem of trying to be cool and hip, without just be your show, be Disney.
I want to get back to specifically this episode a little bit if we can, and one of the things that really impressed me about it was, well, first of all, the time travel made sense, and that's fun, because we've been doing where that doesn't happen. I really...
Change of pace! Time travel made sense!
I love that Darkwing Duck's change into Dark Warrior Duck, where he becomes a dictator and he's oppressing everyone, comes from a character place and seems to be kind of precisely what would happen to him if he dealt with this kind of thing. I liked that it was kind of a for this material, kind of a complex psychology thing, I'm surprised to say. Not overly, convoluted or anything, but that it's not just simply he loses his daughter and bam, he turns into this. Like, I liked it. It was a gradual thing that it happens over time, and like it starts off with his not just having the motivation anymore to be a superhero. I think that's really interesting, that you're a superhero and you lose something and now you're no longer motivated, where that's often the thing that motivates a person to become a superhero, right? And then when he sees someone do something horrible to a child, it just triggers this thing in his head where now he's Batman and he has to make sure that this never happens to any kid again. And then all of a sudden it's kind of talking about the exact themes that we dealt with in Winter Soldier and into Age of Ultron, that we keep dealing with a lot of the Marvel stuff, believe it or not, which I'm not going too far. This is what it's doing, with the idea, with the question of whether or not being a hero means preventing bad things from happening, or to uphold justice when a bad thing happens. And of course, Goslin at the end of the episode kind of comes right out and spells out the moral, but it seems like that's part of the formula of the show, and they kind of maybe always do that. But it's also a cartoon before it's an animated series, so I think it gets a pass on that. And clearly, like, she's spelling it out, but clearly she's actually come to this. And what the moral is that she spells out is everyone deserves the benefit of the doubt. And but I think for kids, I sort of like the fact that they actually came out and said that within the context of this. Manos, I think they get away with a lot in the show over something like Batman the Animated Series because it's packaged as a cartoon before an animated series. This is a distinction that I've talked about some in Rewind when I've dealt with cartoons and with animated series. Where do you draw the line? When is it a series of actual stories that you're supposed to take remotely seriously at all within a context, regardless if it's a comedy or not, or when is it just a cartoon? This show is masquerading as a cartoon, and there's a lot more going on. And I think it's able to get away with so much with that because in Batman the Animated Series, you probably couldn't get away with having somebody like this, or with having a character like Dark Warrior Duck reading down a list and going, this thing, death, this thing, death. And this show can get away with that because
I'm surprised by that.
You can't get any. You're not going to have any actual consequences to the violence, but you can do an alternate future where we're implying that this guy has killed everyone. And I think that's fantastic. I love that scene when he's going down a list, and he goes, the consequences for this is death, and this. It's like we're saying death over and over again in a thing. I mean, there's a reason that in the early '90s, most of your cartoon shows, you heard people say destroy before kill. I couldn't believe all the talking about death and kill, and it's important because it actually allows them to discuss these ideas and these themes. Oh my God, it's kind of freaking brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went back and watched...
Meanwhile, about around the same time, actually...
Oh, go ahead, Manos.
Manos, we got a lag, buddy. Sorry.
Oh, no. Sorry about that. Meanwhile, over in Dragon Ball Z, they would, say, oh, hit you to another dimension. It's like, yeah, are you killing? Come on.
No, that was Yu-Gi-Oh! Dragon Ball Z came out and killed people.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, no, yeah. I mean, yeah, you know they kill people, but they would try to like redub it to make it sound okay. Like, oh, hey, their parachutes are opening up. They're gonna be okay, even though we're not showing you that. But yeah, my eyes opened up a bit when he started reading death, death, death. I mean, it was also funny.
This was
but
the only
that's
episode.
something. That's a
Sorry, what?
yeah. That's
this wasn't
good.
the only episode. We keep talking at the same time.
Go ahead, Lo.
This wasn't the only episode where like death was
Sorry
even
about
discussed. I've kind of gone back over the last week and watched a couple more Darkwing Duck episodes that took place before this one, because this was episode 52. Like, a lot has happened at this point. There's an episode where they spoof Twin Peaks and Invasion of the Body Snatchers in the same episode, and like people, like, they literally think that one of the villains has been killed, and they're talking about that, like, they basically found his dead body, and they're like, whoa, what is happening? Like, I mean, it's definitely not the first time that they talked about it, even though they didn't shy away from it, for sure. I mean, I think I watched about 15 episodes, just kind of sporadically, and there was death in a couple of them, or like mentioned death in a couple of them.
You look at all the censorship problems that we had with Warner Brothers cartoons and with stuff over at Fox, and I don't know how this is so different from that stuff. I don't know, that was really cool. Anyway, let's go to the comments, because we've just got a few minutes left. William Purcell, this episode had more plot and character development than the whole third season of Arrow. Somebody had to say it. So there it is.
Sad but true.
Boosh. Several people mentioning as Steve did that Dark Warrior Duck has a lot in common with Judge Dredd, which was not a thing I thought about while I was watching this, just because all the Miller stuff jumped out at me. But yes, of course, and especially with the way that he is, upholding his version of justice and all of that. One Miller reference though that we forgot to mention that I feel like I would be remiss in not mentioning it, because it was one of my favorite moments, was when Gosselin gets dressed up in her sidekick.
Oh my gosh!
And that's one of the punks from Watchmen from Dark Knight Returns, going all the way with the spikes and stuff, and I just love and the visor, and I just love that, like, she couldn't move in it, so he just took her out of it.
And all you can see are pigtails and a duck bill.
Yeah, hilarious. People are mentioning a lot of characters from this show that I had forgot about. Megavolt, and then there's the robot Doc that was Gizmo Duck. Yeah, that was always
Gizmo Duck
when I was a kid, and I don't remember much about these shows. I watched this and DuckTales. I think DuckTales I watched a lot more. It was early enough, I don't remember it that well, but boy, this brought back some memories. Also, I should mention, if you haven't looked at it at all, go to the old Boom comics that there was and Lo, you need to find these if you haven't read them.
Okay.
There is this brilliant series, this brilliant DuckTales series that Boom did before Disney bought out Marvel. And it's really sad that they lost the license, but it was this giant crossover thing between this and DuckTales and some other Disney stuff, and it's kind of brilliant, and the art is lovely, but it was at this caliber of writing, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, this was technically a spin-off of DuckTales.
Yeah.
Launchpad McQuack, his sidekick, is a character from DuckTales.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that comic took everybody and put it all
right.
All the time, and so that was kind of fun.
I always thought it was interesting that Launchpad spun off from DuckTales, but he wasn't like the lead character of the show he spun off of, which I thought was an interesting way of going about it.
Yeah, it's just like Chief O'Brien from TNG going into DS9.
Yeah, exactly like that.
What else? Looking at some more comments here. I need to hire somebody to moderate my comments for me, so I don't have to spend the whole show going, whoa, what am I going to talk about? Where's the things? Bamboo, this show was on when I was in high school. It's just a comment that happened to actually be about this. Somebody wants to see Steve and Dan do a staring contest instead of a debate.
I saw somebody else, I don't remember who earlier, say that we should, the next debate should be which DW is better, Darkwing Duck or Arthur's sister, and I thought that was hilarious.
That is hilarious. W. Superman 8012. There was an episode called "The Secret Origin of Darkwing Duck," but it wasn't his true origin. Do you remember that, Lo? Do you remember anything about that?
I didn't watch that one recently. I might have seen it back when I watched the show, but yeah, I didn't watch it in this rewatch.
Some folks mentioning gargoyles because of the Disney thing, and probably kind of hoping we'll do something with that. That was another show that I absolutely loved, and of course was on more of the animated series side than the cartoon side. Okay, any final thoughts about this before we kick Steve out and talk about him behind his back?
I'm so happy that you guys liked this. I was really nervous about picking this because I have such a limited knowledge of comics and I'm so new to comics that I was very like, all right, I don't want to pick something that I know nothing about. So I'm really happy that you guys enjoyed it. Even if just to talk about it, like even if it's nothing to watch again, makes me happy.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go as far as to say that I can't wait to go back to the show and actually start watching it again. Because I remembered thinking it was cool looking and the animation was cool, but I remembered thinking that it was kind of a generic superhero spoof, and I don't know why I thought that because it's not. I mean, it looks like it's kind of a cool mythology. I mean, I'd rank it just based on this with other great superhero parodies. Taking Freakazoid. I think it's better than Freakazoid.
It is better than Freakazoid.
And I love Freakazoid. I think it's better than Freakazoid. But yeah, I want to go in and do a top 10 for Rewind now. Like I really want to watch it.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, that is now on my bucket list. It's gonna. And I say bucket list because I have so many projects I want to do, and I could be 45, but I want to do it.
I went through and made my top 10.
45. Oh, that's so old.
Well, yeah, but it's 15 years from now, and I'm just hoping maybe before that. Anyway, Manos is old. It's not his fault.
That's true. It's a joke.
that's a joke. All right, Manos, Steve, you guys have anything else you want to say about this?
No, I'm good.
No, I'm good. I liked it. Yeah, I used to watch the show quite a bit, and I almost, I wish I had. I almost bought some of the figures, which were in the stores at the time.
Great, too. Yeah.
I actually, now that we're talking about this, I'm looking myself. It's like, oh man, if I bought one of those, I could have flashed one up. Because they were kind of neat figures. They were all the whole line, the characters.
You just had to resort to your wah machine.
Yeah. No, I saved that chestnut.
Lo, not only was that a really fun pick and we all really liked it, but actually ultimately turned out to be super, super appropriate for us in a lot of the kinds of stuff that we tend to talk about. I don't know. I think it's honestly in the top 2 or 3 retro picks that we've done this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lo, were you aware of all the Miller references?
I honestly, when you mentioned that it had Miller references on your Facebook post, I had to look up who that was. Oh, is that bad?
No, not at all. Cool, you picked it and didn't know that. That's what I'm excited.
Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, this is my favorite episode of Darkwing Duck. I went through and kind of categorized my kind of top 10, and I was picking between a couple, and I ended up going with this one just because I knew that it had some references to some stuff, just from what little I know of Batman and just superheroes in general. So I figured that you guys would know the things that it was referencing. But yeah, regardless of that, I mean, I just like it as its own episode.
Well, thanks again for picking it. That was super fun to talk about.
My pleasure.
We are going to go on now and bid Steve adieu for just a little bit. Steve, go cram, buddy. Cram your head off.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah, you should start sitting for it.
Get ready, sir, because it's going to be
Logan,
quite grueling. Yes, Manos.
So, has anybody, who's the next pick for next week?
Oh, you know what? We should go ahead and do that, and I'm so glad you said that. I want to say...
Dan is next.
It's
It goes
Dan's turn.
Dan, me, Manos, Lo, and then Cap.
And he's not in here with us right now, so I think what we'll do is I'll announce it here after a while, because we're going to be on this particular show for another half hour. So what we'll do is I'll ask Dan, because he's in the chat right now. He just didn't show up in time to talk about the episode with us. So I'll ask him to let us know what it is, and then I'll go ahead and announce it. And Dan, I don't, because I'm seeing him in the comments right now. So Dan, I don't know if you're listening, but if you are, would you send me that? Let me know what it is on Facebook. Facebook, Dan. And then I'm gonna type right now and tell. Okay, so what I'd like you guys to do right now, this will be officially now the Great Debate pre-show. I want to begin with the real Manos. Manos, my question to you, sir. And once again, I'm gonna ask you guys to do some commentary for some pre-show commentary for me. I am the impartial, so I'm not. I've already heard something from Dan. So Dan either said, "Here's my pick," or "Leave me alone." I'm not telling you. So we'll see which of those it is. But we just lost Lo.
Yeah, what happened? Uh-oh. Oh, here she comes back.
I'm here.
So, Manos, for a minute there, it was going to be a one-sided conversation. Because I am the impartial moderator, I'm not going to be able to weigh in or anything and say who I think might win, or Batman, or Superman, or Spider-Man, whatever like that. So, we're going to start with Manos. And Manos, I want you to make some predictions about the debate. Which of these guys do you think is going to give the greater argument, and what are the strengths and the weaknesses between these two guys?
That's a very good question, Captain Logan. I predict that the biggest advantage that one of our debaters has is Steve. Steve definitely has a lot in his favor. He is highly articulated and well-studied of his subject, and also Batman has a longer history than Spider-Man, at least 20, 25 years longer, and has a greater chance of being a major influence, as well as, let's face it, as a student of both those characters and a fan of both of those characters almost equally, I have to say Batman does have the advantage in better quality stories, particularly during the 80s and 90s.
Lo, who do you think is has the advantage in this debate?
Well, it's hard to tell there, Captain. The amount of tweeting that I've seen coming from Steve makes me think that he has the advantage. But I mean, Dan isn't really on Twitter, so he could be kind of the sleeper hit that'll kind of come in and surprise us all by acting like he maybe hasn't done as much research. But I do lean towards Steve just because I've seen him talking about it for weeks now.
Who's got the greater advantage as far as the character goes? Do you agree with Manos that's Batman because of how much more time and history is under his belt, or sheer popularity? What do you think?
I honestly, I'm going to go opposite of Manos. I watched a lot of Spider-Man growing up. I mean, I know that I'm not really studied in comics, but as far as animated TV shows and stuff like that, I think the only Batman show that I watched was Batman Beyond. And I've watched almost all of the Spider-Man shows that have been on up until the last couple of years. So I have more nostalgia attached to Spider-Man, I feel like, so it's hard for me to give an impartial opinion. I feel like Batman has had better things recently, but as far as longevity goes, Spider-Man's definitely got my vote.
Here's the thing that...
Go ahead, Manos.
Okay, so here's the thing that almost splits this down the middle, because Batman, as I mentioned, has had a larger net to cast over history as far as influence and importance. But I shouldn't have you think that I'm discounting Spider-Man, who in a way is that second generation, where Batman was one of the characters that helped kind of sculpt what we think superheroes are all about. Spider-Man came along and kind of created this notion of an everyman hero and a teenage hero. Because before him, a lot of superheroes were the 40-year-old guys who had all the white male power in the world, and Spider-Man came along, Peter Parker came along, and he was a teenager. He was the new generation boss, and he wasn't perfect, and that definitely kind of sprouted a whole new generation of types of superheroes and fans. So while I do think this is Steve's to lose, it can be lost because to discount Spider-Man's contribution to not only comic books and superheroes, but the culture at large would be sadly mistaken.
So you don't think that Batman automatically has this in the bag and that this is actually a worthwhile thing we're doing?
No, he doesn't. No, this isn't a slam dunk that Steve just has to show up and spout his name and wins.
What would you say, Manos, that Dan, because it does sound like you guys both say that at least you're saying that the fan favorite is more likely to be Steve and Batman. Do you think what do you think Dan needs to do to have more of an edge over Steve?
That's a good question. I think he needs to. You're just full of good questions.
I think he really needs to make sure that he has prepared his responses. I mean, and that goes with
He's got 20 minutes.
But preparing those responses, I think, is super important because he's going to have some good points coming from Steve, and then being able to anticipate what Steve is going to throw at him and being able to turn that back around and not flounder, I think, will be super important for Dan.
Exactly. Dan's big disadvantage is one more day. That is his Benghazi.
That's hilarious. I'm gonna go to the comments right now and see what some folks are saying. Damaged my forehead. At least Batman didn't have the freaking Clone Saga.
And the Clone Saga.
Jack Thon, Batman has All-Star Batman and Robin. A lot of people throwing out stuff that is considered kind of notorious and not good for each, and that might be some cannon fodder against the other character. I guess the question I have for you guys is, do you think that do you think it would be a good approach to bring up things that are really awful on the other side, to do some kind of that sort of mudslinging against the other character? Or do you think that they should stick straight up to their character's strengths and not really throw a lot of darts at the other character? Should they take it just completely on the... You can do that later, Manos. Should you take it completely on the merits, or that's not a T-shirt, is it? No. Should they take it completely on the merits of their character, or should they go for some of those negatives? What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, for every Batman and Robin, there's a Spider-Man 3. So, like, they could go back and forth forever talking about places where people have, had a bad run in the comics, had a bad movie adaptation. Like, those exist, but the issue here isn't who's had the best adaptations, it's who's more culturally relevant. And, yeah, I mean, I don't think that just pointing out, like, oh, well, this movie was done poorly. Like, I don't think anyone would say that, Fantastic Four are not relevant in the world of comics just because of the atrocity that was Fanforstic.
Yeah.
Fanforstic.
Agreed. And Spider-Man has been pretty dominant on animated TV. I mean, up until recently, I'd say he probably had the most shows. During the last few years, Batman, of course, has caught up with having a show, I think, every 10 minutes. So we should have a new show very soon. And I look forward to seeing it sucks compared to Bruce Timm's show.
Manos, if let me ask you this real quick too. Just for yourself, who would you like to see win this? Is it kind of a you don't have a dog in this fight kind of thing, or?
Well, this is kind of tough. I mean, Batman and Spider-Man have been my two favorite characters all my life. And I've even gone back from time to time, like, on who was my favorite. This is an interesting time for me personally because of Brand New Day and New 52, I have abandoned those characters.
Yeah.
So it's weird, a little distance between the two. As well as Wonder Woman. That makes the fourth character that I've been a huge fan of, Daredevil, is the only one I read out of this out of my top 5 now.
Yeah, and hilariously, right now, is great on both adaptation and comics.
Yeah, I know. I mean, his worst is the Ben Affleck Daredevil, and you know what? That ain't that bad.
It's not that bad. It's not Batman and Robin.
It's not. It's not Spider-Man 3 or Batman and Robin.
It's really not. Whoa!
I don't care what anybody says.
Well, if somebody put a gun to your head and you had to argue for one of these characters, which one would you go for?
Oh, jeez, man. I think gun to my head, I would probably go for Batman. I think I know a little bit more about the character just because recently Batman's been a lot more relevant, specifically with like the Dark Knight trilogy, and then there's the new movie coming out. Is that later this year? Oh my gosh. But
what are we talking about?
I don't know. I think Batman, even though I would like to see Spider-Man win.
Is that because you see him as kind of the underdog?
I see Spider-Man as kind of the underdog. Yeah. I think I don't know why, but I feel like Spider-Man is the underdog, and I'd like to see Spider-Man win because I have more nostalgia attached to him. But that's the only reason, and it's not a very good one.
you just like Dan more than Steve.
I feel like Spider-Man's disadvantage is the last 20 years. I think the 90s and 2000s were a tough couple of decades for Spider-Man, where they have not been for Batman. Batman has a much better previous 20 years than Spider-Man has.
Going back to the comments, the Hellish Smile says, I think Batman is more relevant because people are always clamoring for more Batman, while I think people just got tired of Spider-Man. Captain America and Iron Man have replaced Spidey just on Marvel's side alone. Batman is the face of DC. Spidey isn't even the face of Marvel anymore, and I'm curious to see how that is tackled. Manos, do you agree with that? Do you think that people have kind of abandoned Spider-Man because they're not happy with what's happening with him in media stuff, regardless of the fact that Slot's comics, whether or not you and I like them, are selling well? What do you think?
That is a good question, because that's not the first time I've heard people talk about that. I've heard people talk about, like, Iron Man has replaced Spider-Man as the face of Marvel, not just because of the super cool Robert Downey Jr. movies, but his comics have been over the last 2 years. And very important, and he's...
The numbers don't really reflect that, though. Like just
I know.
Sales, yeah.
We're in this weird thing that Spider-Man sells no matter how bad his comics get, which I think actually lends to the argument of how important Spider-Man is.
Well, that's why I have a hard time saying. I guess I said I was going to weigh in. I'm not weighing in on the debate side. That's why I have a difficult time.
You're asking questions like a good fake journalist.
That's why it's my fake journalist hat. That's why I feel like this guy might be slightly mistaken, maybe about the notion that people are tired of Spider-Man. I think people are maybe tired of Spider-Man with media stuff, maybe, but or tired of what's being put out right now. But like I think people a lot of people have not stopped being Spider-Man fans, have they? Just like for whatever their version is, kind of like Batman. Like, you have your definitive version of Batman, and you're still a fan of that.
Yeah, I still read the book in a while, and I know I'm not the only person who has a one more day ban.
Yeah.
But let's face it, his origin. The reason his origin has been so all over the place is because it's a pretty great origin. It's pretty. It's almost like a religious parable. And, it's one of the strongest origins in comics. Even stronger, I think, than Superman and Batman's.
Well, that's going to be very interesting to see how these guys argue the origins, especially. I'm looking forward to seeing when and if that kind of stuff pops up. We're going to go ahead and take a break before we get to the debate proper. We're going to begin that promptly at 9 o'clock Central Time, 10 o'clock Eastern. And real quick before we do that, let's hear one more thing. One more thing. One more day, Manos. One more thing from Manos and Low. Manos, how? So are you going to pick a person? Like this person is probably going to win. What do you think?
I'm leaning towards Bernie Sanders.
He's non-committal. It's harder when you know these people and you're not being a fake journalist. Well, you're pretending to be a fake.
I think, yes. I don't know about rooting, but I'm leaning towards Steve. I think he has a lot of advantage in his favor.
Lo, you think Dan might pull it out?
I definitely think that Dan could, and I think that Spider-Man is certainly a more relatable character, and I think that he could really use that to his advantage in this debate, because I think that that is just something that matters with readers and media consumers, so we'll see.
This is a great comment. Real quick, Mind the Gap says, no matter what the rough patches, Spider-Man and Batman will always endure as flagships. Really cool to put these guys together. Let's see what happens. We will see everyone in 10 minutes. Make sure that you go to the other link for the second live show. It's the Great Debate live show. I will make sure and put the link once again in the comments if you're there. And the comment box will be the same box that we'll be using, of course, through the debate. I am going to ask people, this is a last-minute change, I am going to ask people to please tweet your questions instead of putting them in the chat box, so that I only see questions in one place on Twitter. Okay, at Geekvolution on Twitter, and feel free to go ahead and start doing that now. Ask a question that you'd like Dan and or Steve to answer, and we're going to have an audience question and answer session for the remainder of the time after the moderated questions during the debate. And then these guys will join us again toward the end of the debate to analyze the debate and tell us how they think that the two competitors did. We will see you again in 10 minutes. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and thanks for watching us talk about Darkwing Duck. I'm Captain Logan. This was The Real Manos.
Look, it's me as the baby!
Curious Low.
Bye, guys. Thanks for watching.
And Steve was here, too. We'll see Steve and Dan here in a little bit, and we will put them through their paces. Thanks for watching.